Let me tell you a story that doesn't start with joy or laughter or sunshine. It begins in a cemetery. A cold, gray afternoon in Rhode Island. The kind of sky that feels like it hasn't seen sunlight in days. The wind wasn't just blowing, it was slicing. It picked up dead leaves, spun them into little whirlwinds, and scattered them around a freshly dug grave at Oakwood Cemetery. And there, standing motionless, was Jackson Montgomery. Now, if you heard that name in a business podcast or Forbes article, you'd probably think of a finance legend, a titan of Wall Street, the man behind some of the most aggressive acquisitions and perfectly timed exits in the investment world. Ruthless, brilliant, always 2 steps ahead. But right now, none of that mattered. Because Jackson wasn't thinking about hedge funds or stock performance or quarterly projections. He was burying his wife. Her name was Eleanor, and she was everything. His anchor, his balance. She was the only person who had ever looked past his billion-dollar portfolio and seen the man underneath, the version of him that didn't wear $1,000 suits or talk strategy 20 hours a day. They had spent 2 decades together. There was love, there was laughter, and yes, there were regrets. The biggest one, no children. They had tried. God, they had tried, but it never worked. And eventually, they let go of the idea. Quietly, painfully, they built a life without kids. A big, beautiful life, but a life that always had one empty room. Now that life was over. As Jackson stood there watching her casket get lowered into the ground, he didn't feel like the man who moved markets. He felt hollow, as if the best part of him was being buried along with her. The funeral was, unsurprisingly, massive. Rhode Island's elite showed up in full force. Some came with real grief in their eyes. Others came because, well, being seen at a Montgomery funeral was still good for your niche. Colleagues, investors, politicians, people he barely remembered shaking his hand with somber faces, offering condolences that sounded like recycled scripts. Jackson didn't hear a word of it. He just kept staring at the ground, at the polished wood, at the world that was moving around him while his heart stood still. Eventually, people started to drift away. The murmurs faded. The cold didn't, but Jackson stayed. His driver, Thomas, an older gentleman who had been with the Montgomery family longer than most of Jackson's companies had existed, waited quietly in the distance, hands folded, knowing not to interrupt. Then something happened. Just as Jackson turned to finally walk away, something caught his eye. 3 small figures, standing near the edge of the cemetery by a giant oak tree, just far enough that you could miss them, but close enough that they were clearly watching. 3 little girls, identical, the kind of identical that makes you stop in your tracks. Like one of those illusions where you think you're seeing double, only now you're seeing triple. Same auburn hair pulled into neat ponytails. Same navy blue coats. Same solemn expressions. They looked about 8 years old. Jackson frowned. They weren't part of the funeral. Not part of any family he knew. Not dressed in the same polished way as the other guests. Their coats were simpler. Their shoes more worn. But they stood together like a unit, holding hands tightly. What was eerie wasn't just that they looked the same. It was the way they stared at him. Not scared, not curious, just focused, like they knew something he didn't, like they were there for a reason. One of them, he couldn't tell which, took a step forward. Just one. Then she stopped, eyes locked with his for just a second, and then, just as quickly as they'd appeared, all 3 girls turned in perfect unison and disappeared behind the tree. Gone. Sir. Thomas's voice was soft, not wanting to startle him. The car's ready. Jackson blinked and looked back. Nothing. Just the old oak, standing still in the wind. Maybe they were someone else's grandkids. or neighborhood kids, or just wandering nearby. But something in his chest didn't buy that. And the strangest part? He couldn't stop thinking about them. Later that night, Jackson sat in his penthouse, staring out over the Manhattan skyline. The whiskey in his hand had gone warm. The fireplace crackled behind him. He was alone, really alone, for the first time in a very long time. Eleanor's photo sat on his desk, smiling, frozen in a moment he could never return to. He couldn't stop seeing those girls. 3 of them, identical, watching him with eyes that felt too old for their age. He wasn't the kind of man who chased ghosts. He believed in logic, in data, in decisions backed by hard numbers. But even he had to admit, it didn't feel like a coincidence. And Eleanor, she would have said it was a sign. She always believed in those. Nothing happens by accident, she used to say. The universe gives you nudges. Pay attention to them. Jackson had rolled his eyes back then. Now he was sitting alone in silence, replaying the exact way those girls had looked at him. That night, he didn't sleep. Jackson Montgomery had weathered hostile takeovers, billion-dollar crashes, and the worst of Wall Street betrayals. But nothing had ever hit him like this. Meredith, 3 syllables, and suddenly he was 29 again, standing beneath a string of paper lanterns at a Columbia University fundraiser, holding a glass of wine he never finished, while listening to a woman quote Rilke with her hands dancing in the air. She was magnetic, bright, unfiltered. She challenged him, teased him, made him think differently, feel differently. Their time together had been short, not because of lack of connection, but because life had pulled them apart. He had an opportunity in London. She wanted him to stay. He told her he couldn't, so she let him go, and apparently she never looked back. Except she had, just not in the way he expected. He sat frozen in his office as Thomas continued speaking on the other end of the line. The girl's aunt, Charlotte Wilson, is their legal guardian now. I did some quiet checking. Meredith passed away at Mount Sinai. She'd been battling acute leukemia for nearly a year. Jackson swallowed hard. And the girls, he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. They were born at New York Presbyterian. Thomas continued. Triplets. No father listed on the birth certificate. But the timing matches. Jackson finished for him. Yes, sir. Perfectly. Jackson leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling like it could offer answers. He felt like the past 10 years had just collapsed inward on themselves. 3 daughters. 3 little girls he never knew he had. And now their mother, his Meredith, was gone. The next morning, Thomas arrived with a manila folder thick with documents, birth certificates, school records, doctor's reports, a death certificate, and a photograph. 3 girls, arms around each other in ballet costumes, standing in front of a smiling, thin Meredith. She looked tired, sick, but proud. Jackson stared at the picture until it blurred. There was no denying it anymore. He had children, not in theory, not in regret. They existed, and they had been living just across the river while he'd been flying in and out of boardrooms, making speeches about legacy, building condos for people he'd never meet, donating to causes Eleanor cared about, while the most important cause of his life had been raised without him. She never told me, he muttered. Thomas cleared his throat. Sir, I found something else. From a folder, he pulled out a sealed envelope. It was found with Meredith's things at the hospital. It's addressed to the girls. Jackson took the letter, recognizing the handwriting immediately. His hand shook slightly as he unfolded the paper and read, My sweet girls, if you're reading this, then I've had to leave you sooner than I wanted. There's something I've never told you, something I'd always planned to, when the time felt right. Your father's name is Jackson Montgomery. He was brilliant and brave and complicated. And for a while, he was the love of my life. When I found out I was carrying you, he had already left for London. I made a choice not to tell him. Not because I didn't think he'd care, but because I knew his future was heading somewhere big. And I didn't want to be the person who made him choose between that dream and a responsibility he didn't ask for. I never regretted that decision, not once. But if one day you feel the need to find him, or if he finds you, please remember this. You were never unwanted. You were always loved. Mom. By the time he finished, Jackson couldn't breathe. She hadn't kept him from him out of spite. She had protected him. Even as she raised 3 daughters on her own. Even as she got sick. Even as she watched him from afar, no doubt seeing his face in the headlines, on TV, wondering if he ever thought about her. He had. Just never enough. And now all he could think about were 3 little girls in navy blue coats standing behind an oak tree, looking at him like he was someone they almost remembered. Jackson knew what he had to do. I want to see them, he told Thomas. Understood, sir. But not as their father. Not yet. I need to be around them, see who they are, what they become, what she built without me. That afternoon, Thomas drove him to Brooklyn. They parked across the street from PS 107, the public school where the girls were enrolled. Jackson sat quietly, hands clasped, watching as the doors opened and kids flooded out. Then he saw them, 3 identical girls in matching uniforms, walking side by side like a well-rehearsed unit. Harper, Haley, Hannah. He didn't know which was which, but already he saw the differences. One walked a little faster, as if always one step ahead. Another glanced around constantly, curious. The third had a skip in her step, lighter, like she carried music in her bones. He watched them climb into a car with a woman he assumed was Charlotte. They were laughing, and he wasn't part of it. For the next week, Jackson watched from a distance. He memorized their routines. Mondays and Wednesdays, ballet practice. Thursdays, after-school art program. Fridays, ice cream with Aunt Charlotte at a shop called Sweet Fern. He stayed in his car, wore a baseball cap, made sure not to get too close. But he saw everything. Harper was a leader, always walking ahead, standing tall. Haley was the observer, calculating, watchful. Hannah was the feeler. She danced even when she walked, spun in circles while waiting for the walk signal to change. He saw Meredith in each of them, and, God help him, he saw himself too. On the 8th day, he told Thomas, I want everything. Everything, sir. Medical records, teacher's notes, favorite books. I want to know who they are. Thomas hesitated. Sir, I did find something I think you should see first. He handed Jackson another envelope. This time, it wasn't a birth certificate or a school form. It was a drawing. 3 little girls, holding hands. Behind them, a woman in a hospital bed, smiling. Jackson felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. She kept drawing this, Thomas explained. According to a teacher, the youngest, Hannah, draws the same scene every time she's left alone during art hour. Jackson stared at it. He'd missed everything. And no amount of money, no power, no corporate empire could rewind time. He called Charlotte, introduced himself as an old friend of Meredith's, said he had just learned of her passing, and wanted to pay respects. Charlotte was cautious, but after Jackson forwarded a copy of Meredith's letter, she called him back. They don't know who you are, she said. I know. They've been through a lot. They don't need more surprises. I'm not here to disrupt their lives, Jackson promised. I just want to see them. That's all. After a pause, she said, we go to Prospect Park every Saturday afternoon. I'll let them know you'll be there. Jackson was on the bench early. He wore jeans and a jacket. No watch, no tie, just the man. Then he saw them. 3 little girls in red, blue, and purple jackets. Harper, Haley, Hannah. Charlotte leaned down and whispered something. The girls looked up confused, then curious. They said you were a friend of Mom's? Harper asked, arms crossed like a tiny CO. I was, Jackson said, standing. A long time ago. They stared at him. He didn't push. Charlotte gestured toward the swings. Why don't you go play while I speak with Mr. Montgomery? As they ran off, Jackson turned to Charlotte. She raised them well, he said, quietly. She did, Charlotte replied. And she never said a bad word about you. Jackson didn't answer. He didn't need to. Harper came back first. She stood in front of him, chin lifted. Did you love our mom? Jackson's heart stopped. He looked at her, at all of them, then nodded. Yes, I did. For a moment after Jackson said it, yes, I did love your mom. No one spoke. The girls stared at him, as if weighing his answer like a riddle they'd heard before, but were still figuring out. Jackson didn't try to fill the silence. He knew better. Children, especially smart ones, didn't need you to explain everything right away. They needed time to decide whether to believe you. It was Hannah who broke the quiet. She used to smile different when she talked about you, she said, looking down at her shoes. A softer smile. That's what Aunt Charlotte called it. Jackson's throat tightened. I didn't know that, he said softly. She didn't tell us much, Haley added. Just that you were smart and ambitious. That you had a big job in another country. And that you were going to change the world, Harper said, crossing her arms like it was some sort of challenge. Jackson gave a small smile. She said that, huh? She did, Haley confirmed. Did you? He paused. It wasn't the kind of question you answered quickly, especially not to kids whose entire world had just cracked open. I tried, Jackson said honestly, but sometimes the things you think matter the most when you're young don't hold up later. I changed the world in some ways, sure, but maybe not the ways that really count. The girls didn't respond, but they didn't walk away either, which, to Jackson, felt like a victory. Charlotte stood nearby, watching, arms folded in expression unreadable, but she didn't intervene, didn't interrupt, just let it happen. After a while, Harper finally said, You want to come get ice cream with us? Jackson blinked. Ice cream. It's Friday, Hannah chimed in. We always get ice cream on Fridays. Jackson looked at Charlotte, who gave him a subtle nod. We go to a place 2 blocks over, she said. Sweet Fern. Jackson smiled for real now. I'd love to. Sweet Fern was a kind of ice cream shop you only find in Brooklyn. Chalkboard menus, local ingredients, and kids' drawings taped to the counter. The girls took their usual spot at a round table in the back, immediately launching into a debate about flavors. Harper wanted vanilla with rainbow sprinkles. Haley argued for dark chocolate with sea salt. Hannah kept bouncing between strawberry and lavender honey, like it was the biggest decision of her life. Jackson watched them with quiet fascination, not just as a man realizing he was watching his own children, but as someone who was suddenly seeing what he'd been missing. Moments like this. He ordered plain mint chip, sat down, and didn't speak unless they asked him a question. Haley was the first. What do you do now? She asked. I run an investment firm, Jackson replied. I work with companies, help them grow, sometimes help them rebuild. Like Shark Tank? She asked, eyes narrowing in curiosity. Jackson chuckled. Sort of. A little more boring, though. Harper squinted. Are you rich? Harper, Charlotte warned gently. Jackson raised a hand. It's okay. Yes, Harper. I'm rich. She nodded slowly, like she was filing the information away for later. You drive a black car with tinted windows, she said. So I figured. Good deduction, Jackson said with a smile. But you didn't help Mom when she got sick, she said bluntly. Silence dropped over the table. Jackson's stomach dropped. His mint chip didn't taste like anything anymore. "You're right," he said after a pause. "I didn't, and I'll never stop regretting that." Harper held his gaze, then finally nodded. They kept eating, and somehow that moment passed. Back at their apartment, Charlotte paused with him outside before unlocking the door. "You held your own," she said. "That's not easy with those three." "They're brilliant," Jackson said, looking toward the sound of giggles through the door. "They're also cautious," she added. "They don't let people in easily." "I don't blame them." Charlotte looked at him for a moment. "Are you planning to tell them?" Jackson didn't answer right away. "I want to, but not yet. Not until I've earned it." She studied him. "Fair enough." Then she opened the door. Inside, the girls had already kicked off their shoes and settled into homework time. The living room was cozy but cramped. Books piled high, one couch, a small table covered in crayons and math worksheets. "Can we show you our room?" Hannah asked, pulling him down the hallway. "Of course," he said. Their bedroom was a small rectangle, made smaller by the fact that it held 3 beds. Each bed was decorated differently. Harper's bed was neat and organized, with a shelf of carefully stacked books. Haley's had a small microscope and a laminated solar system poster taped to the wall. Hannah's was covered in stuffed animals and drawings taped everywhere, some messy, some shockingly good. "This is Mom's box," Hannah said, pointing to a wooden keepsake box on the shared desk. Inside were photos, pressed flowers, a couple of earrings, and an old picture of Jackson and Meredith. He picked it up slowly. It was taken outside a library at Columbia. He was in a gray sweater. She was laughing, her hand on his chest. He hadn't seen it in almost a decade. "She called you her what-if person," Hannah said, sitting beside him on the bed. Jackson turned to her. "What's that mean?" Haley answered from across the room. "The person you always wonder about. What if things had been different?" He nodded. "She was that for me, too." There was a pause. Then Harper spoke. "We had a meeting," she said suddenly. Jackson blinked. "A meeting?" "A sister meeting," Hannah clarified. "About you," Haley added. Jackson sat up straighter. "Oh." Harper pulled a folded piece of paper from under her mattress. "These are the rules." He took it and opened it. "Rule 1, you can't replace Mom. Rule 2, don't break promises. Rule 3, no trying to buy us. Rule 4, always tell the truth. Rule 5, if we ask you to go away, you have to go." Jackson looked up at them. "I can agree to all of those," he said sincerely. Harper stared at him like she was still deciding, then gave a small nod. "Okay," she said. And just like that, he was in, not as a father, but as something. Over the next several weeks, a routine formed. Jackson showed up every Saturday like clockwork. Sometimes he took them to the park, sometimes to a museum. Once, he sat through an entire animated movie about talking farm animals and didn't complain once, even though he was the only adult in the theater not glued to his phone. Tuesday evenings became homework night. He'd swing by after work, bring takeout from their favorite diner, and help with math problems or science projects or reviewing spelling words. He never missed a single night, and he never tried to take over. He let them lead. One Saturday, after an afternoon at the Science Museum, Jackson walked him back to the apartment and hesitated in the hallway. "I was wondering," he said slowly, "if you want to come over sometime. To my place." 3 sets of eyes turned toward him. "I've been working on some rooms," he added, "just in case you ever wanted to stay over. No pressure." "You mean like sleepover rooms?" Hannah asked. "Yes." Haley tilted her head. "Would they all be the same?" "No," Jackson said quickly. 3 separate rooms. Different styles. "I'd love your input on how they should look." Another sister meeting happened. On the spot, whispering, nods, serious glances. Then Harper said, "Well, think about it." But Jackson noticed the way Haley's eyes lit up, and how Hannah was already smiling. That night, Jackson called his architect. "We need to move faster," he said. "I want it finished by next month. And make sure the rooms reflect who they are. I'll send you notes." "Yes, Mr. Montgomery." "One more thing." "Yes." "Don't call me Mr. Montgomery." Jackson had never built a home before. Sure, he'd funded skyscrapers, directed real estate acquisitions worth billions, and greenlit plans for entire neighborhoods. But those were investments, projects, assets. This was different. This was personal. He wasn't building for buyers or shareholders this time. He was building for Harper, Haley, and Hannah, his daughters, even if they didn't know it yet. The east wing of his penthouse, once used as an entertainment space that hadn't seen a single guest in over a year, was now under full renovation. Designers, architects, electricians. Jackson was in the middle of it all, tossing out furniture that had been chosen for style over comfort, replacing cold marble floors with soft carpets, trading sterile grays for warm pastels. Each girl would get her own room, not a copy and paste layout, not just cute spaces. These were rooms designed for them. Harper's room was structured, symmetrical, with high bookshelves and a window seat, just like she'd once said she liked when reading at the library. Haley's featured a custom-built science desk, wall-mounted maps, and a telescope aimed at the stars through oversized corner windows. And Hannah's room? Lavender walls, a ballet bar, an art station by the window, and floating shelves for her sketches. Jackson had researched every detail himself, ordered samples, touched fabric swatches with the care of someone selecting medicine, not materials. He wasn't trying to impress them. He was trying to make space for them in his world, because whether they knew it or not, they had already taken up all the space in his heart. On a chilly Saturday in November, the girls finally came to visit. It wasn't an overnight stay. Not yet. Charlotte had made that clear. But the girls had agreed to help supervise the room progress. "I'll be conducting a walkthrough," Harper said at the front door, clipboard in hand like a tiny building inspector. Jackson smiled as he opened the door wide. Welcome. The penthouse felt less like a fortress now. Warmer. Lived in. The girls' laughter echoed against the walls, filling corners that had only known silence. They ran from room to room, giggling, gasping, pointing out details. "This is the color I picked." Hannah squealed in delight as she touched the wall in her room. "And the desk is the exact measurements I gave you," Haley said, impressed. Harper stood still in hers, taking it all in, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf, the big reading chair in the corner, the antique globe. Jackson watched her closely. She didn't say anything at first, just walked slowly to the window seat, sat down, and looked out at the city. "I could get used to this," she finally said. It was the closest thing to approval he could have hoped for. Later, they gathered in the kitchen for snacks. Jackson made grilled cheese sandwiches while the girls argued about whether or not tomato soup was gross or amazing. Hannah was firmly in the amazing camp. Harper called it chunky hot juice. Haley said the sodium content was too high to be considered a real food. Jackson laughed more in that hour than he had in months. Then Harper hit him with it. "Why are you doing all this?" He turned from the stove. "What do you mean?" "Like, we're not your kids," she said, direct as ever. "So why go through all this trouble?" The room fell quiet. Jackson's hands froze mid-motion. He could have lied. He could have said something vague about just being close to your mom, or wanting to help, or missing being part of family. But he was tired of lying. He looked at Charlotte, who had just entered with a load of folded laundry. She paused, sensing the weight of the moment. "I think they're old enough," Jackson said quietly. "Don't you?" Charlotte nodded once. Jackson turned back to the girls. He walked over to the table, sat down, looked at all three of them. Harper's narrowed eyes, Haley's steady curiosity, Hannah's subtle nervous energy. "There's something I haven't told you," he said. They leaned in instinctively. "I didn't just know your mom. We weren't just friends. We were together a long time ago." Harper's arms crossed. So? That still doesn't explain anything. Jackson's heart beat in his ears. She didn't tell me about you. Not back then. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. Haley was the first to understand. Her eyes widened slightly. Her hand slowly dropped the chip she'd been holding. What are you saying? She asked. I'm saying, he exhaled. I'm your father. The silence was thick, tangible. Not a breath moved. No, Harper said flatly. I am. She would have told us. She wanted to, Jackson replied. She wrote letters. She kept a picture of me. But she thought she was protecting you. And maybe protecting me too. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. He laid it on the table. I brought one of the letters. She left it at the hospital. Your aunt gave it to me. Haley reached out first, opened it, read silently, then passed it to Hannah, who read aloud in a trembling voice. You are my 3 miracles. Your father's name is Jackson Montgomery. I chose not to tell him. I didn't want you to grow up thinking he left you because he didn't know you existed. When she finished, no one moved. Hannah looked at Jackson. So all this time you didn't know? I swear I didn't. Then why now? Harper's voice cracked slightly. Why are you showing up now? Jackson looked at her, eyes gentle. Because when I saw you at the funeral, I knew. I didn't understand it at first, but something inside me did. And after that, I couldn't stay away. I wanted to know you. I want to be here. However you let me. Harper stared at him, hard, searching his face. Then she got up and walked into her room. Haley sat frozen. Hannah looked down. Jackson didn't chase after anyone. He stayed right there. Charlotte crossed the room, laid a hand on his shoulder, and whispered, Give them space. So he did. An hour passed. Jackson sat on the balcony, overlooking the city, unsure if he'd ruined everything. Then he heard the door open behind him. Haley stepped out. I believe you, she said. Jackson blinked. I'm still mad you didn't know, she continued. But I believe you. Then Hannah appeared. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. And then, surprisingly, Harper walked in last. She didn't sit, but she spoke. You still have to follow the rules, she said. Jackson nodded. Absolutely. Harper studied him for another long moment. Fine, she said, but no skipping Fridays. Ice cream is non-negotiable. Jackson smiled. Deal. That night, when he walked to his car, Charlotte followed him out. They're in shock, she said, but they'll be okay. Will you be? Jackson asked. She gave him a tight smile. It's not about me anymore. It's about them. He nodded. Just promise me one thing, she added. Anything. Don't disappear. Jackson didn't hesitate. Never. The first time Jackson Montgomery ever carved a turkey himself, he nearly dropped it on the floor. It wasn't because he didn't know how. He did, technically. He'd watched enough Food Network to understand the basics. It was more that he had never needed to before. Thanksgiving, for most of his adult life, had been catered, polished, something scheduled between board meetings or international flights. But this year, there were 3 little girls sitting at a dining table in his penthouse. Their chairs too short for the polished mahogany. Their napkins folded into sloppy triangles. Their giggles echoing down the hall. And Jackson? He wasn't just the host. He was their father. Thanksgiving had started awkwardly. Harper still didn't fully trust him. Haley was full of questions. And Hannah had bounced between excitement and anxiety every 10 minutes. Charlotte had brought over a green bean casserole and stayed just long enough to ensure no one was going to throw mashed potatoes out of protest. Jackson had decorated the place himself. Well, he'd tried. The table had mini pumpkins and glittery name tags, but most of the glitter had ended up in his eyebrows. But the turkey? That bird was his Everest. Dad! The knife goes the other way, Hannah giggled from across the kitchen island. Jackson paused mid-slice. Are you sure? I saw it on TikTok, she declared with absolute authority. That's not very reassuring, Harper muttered, arms crossed. She's right, Haley added, peeking at the carving video on her tablet. The angle's wrong. You're going against the grain. Okay, Jackson laughed, holding up his hands. Let's all take a deep breath before this becomes a national emergency. By the time dinner hit the table, it was far from perfect. The stuffing was slightly burnt, and Jackson had completely forgotten to make gravy. But none of that mattered, because they were there, because they were talking, laughing, passing roles, and poking fun at one another. And for the first time in a long time, Jackson didn't feel like a visitor in his own life. He fell home. After dessert, store-bought pumpkin pie they'd ranked on a whiteboard, Jackson found himself alone with Harper on the balcony. The city glowed below, all lights and hum. You were kind of funny today, she admitted, sitting cross-legged on the patio chair. Kinda? Jackson asked, raising an eyebrow. She smiled faintly. Okay, more than kinda. You tried really hard. I'll take that as a win. Harper glanced over at him. I didn't think I needed a dad, she said suddenly. Not really. We were fine. We had Aunt Charlotte. We had each other. Jackson nodded, letting her speak. But today didn't feel bad. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. December came faster than expected. And with it, Christmas. The girls wanted to decorate the tree at Jackson's. Each picked a theme. Harper wanted gold and navy. Haley wanted planets and science ornaments. Hannah wanted glitter, sparkles, and anything that screamed extra. They compromised by creating a chaos tree. It had planets and bows, and a sparkly unicorn riding a comet near the top. Jackson had never loved a tree more. They baked cookies, watched holiday movies. Hannah made everyone matching red pajamas with puffy paint that said Montgomery-ish. And one night, while Jackson was brushing frosting off the counter, Haley asked a question. So, are we going to stay here like always? Jackson froze. He turned, saw her leaning on the island, fingers tugging her sleeve. I don't know, he said gently. Do you want to? She shrugged. Sometimes. It feels right here. But I don't want to leave Charlotte. You wouldn't have to, Jackson said. We could make something work. Something all of us could live with. Haley studied him. Do you want to be our full-time dad? Jackson didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. I want that more than anything. She nodded, didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. The custody process started slowly. Charlotte was supportive, but cautious. She wasn't just handing over 3 children to a stranger, even if that stranger had biological ties. She insisted on meetings, family therapy, documentation, proof that Jackson was in it for the long haul, and he welcomed all of it. He attended every meeting, every session, sat through tough conversations, apologized for mistakes he hadn't even made but felt responsible for. He showed up over and over again until one day, in a quiet moment during a court hearing, Charlotte turned to him and said, "They're yours too. Now make sure they always know it." One evening, after the paperwork was filed but not finalized, Jackson found Hannah in her room, staring at a drawing. "What ya working on?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She held it up. It was their family. 4 people. Harper, Haley, Hannah, and him. Above the figures in crooked letters, it said, "Us." Jackson blinked fast. "Can I hang it in the hallway?" he asked, voice soft. "Only if you say the thing," she replied. "What thing?" "You know the thing." He tilted his head. She leaned in, whispered, "Say you're our dad." Jackson swallowed. "I'm your dad," he said. Then louder, "I'm your dad." Then louder still, down the hall, "I'm your dad." Harper popped her head out of her room. "We know. You don't have to yell." Jackson grinned, just making sure. And then came the fight. Because no story like this goes without one. It started small. A missed dance recital. Hannah had told him, but he'd scheduled a business call that ran late. By the time he arrived, it was over. She was already in tears. "You promised," she whispered, not yelling, just heartbroken. "I know," he said. "I tried. You always try." Harper cut in. "But you're still not here when it counts." Haley stood silent, watching. Charlotte gave him a look across the room. "Don't talk. Just listen." He did. He stood there and listened as Harper vented, as Hannah cried, as Haley asked whether this meant he'd stop showing up. And Jackson? He didn't offend himself. He apologized. Then he made a change. He scaled back his hours. Let go of one of the boards he was on. Delegated more. Set a hard boundary. Nothing interferes with the girls' events. And when he showed up on time to Haley's science fair and to Harper's debate final and to every single one of Hannah's next rehearsals, they noticed. They didn't say much, but they noticed. It was on a random Thursday in March when it happened. Jackson picked up the girls from school. The car ride was full of nonsense songs and snack debates. As they got out of the car, Harper called over her shoulder, "Hey, don't forget to sign the field trip form, Dad." Jackson froze. Just for a second. Then he smiled. Not Mr. Montgomery. Not him. Not that guy. Dad. On a bright spring morning in April, Jackson Montgomery's entire world ended up on the front page of every major finance blog, tabloid site, and business column in the country. The headline was brutal. Wall Street Wunderkind hides secret family. Montgomery's billion-dollar lie. It was everywhere. CNBC, Bloomberg, BuzzFeed, even TMZ. The photos weren't flattering. One showed Jackson walking out of Charlotte's apartment with the girls beside him. Another, a zoomed-in shot of Harper and Haley during school drop-off. They looked confused. Hannah looked like she was about to cry. Jackson felt sick. The article went on to spin an elaborate, half-true story about secret children, legacy cover-ups, and billionaire guilt trips. It implied he'd known about the girls all along and had abandoned them, only reappearing now as some kind of rebranding stunt. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. It was out there now. The first call came from his firm's PR director. "Damage control," she said, rapid fire. "We need a statement. A denial, if possible. Or a pivot to human interest. Something soft." The second call came from his legal team. "Do you want to sue for defamation? Privacy violation? Do the girls have legal guardianship papers? Do we press back or settle down?" The third call came from his board. "We're getting pressure. This could spook investors. We need clarity, Jackson. Now." And the fourth? The fourth was from Charlotte. "They were swarmed outside school," she said, her voice tight with fury. "Harper punched a camera guy. I'm not even mad, just telling you what happened." "I'm so sorry," Jackson whispered. "I know," she said, "but it's not about you anymore." He sat at his desk, staring at the mess he hadn't meant to create. That night, the girls were silent during dinner. Haley kept checking her phone. Harper refused to talk. Hannah didn't even eat her ice cream. It wasn't until they were getting ready for bed that Harper finally spoke. "So now everyone knows?" Jackson was tucking in Hannah, but he turned toward her. "Yes, it leaked somehow. Are we going to be famous now?" Hannah asked, unsure if she should be excited or scared. "No," Jackson said softly. "We're going to be a little annoyed for a while, but I'll handle it." "People are calling us love children," Haley muttered from the hallway. "That's gross." "I know," Jackson replied, "and I hate it too." He sat on the edge of Hannah's bed. "I need you to know something," he said. "This wasn't supposed to happen. I never wanted the world to know about you like this. But I'm not going anywhere, no matter what anyone says." Harper leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You say that a lot." "And I'll keep saying it," Jackson said, "until you believe it." The next day, Jackson walked into a boardroom full of stiff faces. The company he'd built, the one he'd poured his life into, was nervous. The chairman of the board, Leonard, looked at him like he was a liability for the first time in 15 years. "This isn't personal, Jack," he said. "It's business, and business doesn't like chaos." Jackson didn't flinch. "Let's make one thing clear," he said calmly. "This isn't chaos. It's family. And if this company has a problem with family, then maybe I have a problem with this company." Murmurs swept through the room. "You're emotional," Leonard said. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking very clearly," Jackson shot back. "I've spent my life chasing the wrong metrics. I missed a funeral. I missed the birth of my own children. I'm not missing this." Another board member tried to mediate. "Jackson, we respect what you're dealing with, but we have a duty to our investors. And I have a duty to my daughters." The room fell silent. He didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He simply stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and said, "If I'm too much a liability, feel free to fire me." No one did. No one even moved. Because at the end of the day, even in finance, there's something undeniable about a man who knows exactly who he is. That weekend, Jackson did something he hadn't done in years. He turned off his phone. All of it. No emails. No Bloomberg alerts. No headlines. Just him and the girls. They drove upstate, rented a tiny cabin on a lake, built a fire, roasted marshmallows, told stories under stars. They played charades. Harper was oddly terrifying as a velociraptor. Haley, of course, acted out gravitational pull like a full-on physics lecture. And Hannah? She pretended to be Jackson, complete with a fake tie, a grumpy face, and yelling, "Who moved my calendar?" He laughed so hard he nearly cried. For 3 days, there were no cameras, no rumors, no responsibilities. Just them, a family. But when they returned, the storm wasn't over. A new article had dropped, this one uglier. It dredged up Meredith's past, speculated on her motives, painted her as a woman who trapped a billionaire. It was disgusting, exploitative, filled with lies. Jackson saw red. He stormed into his PR team's office and slammed the paper down. "She's not here to defend herself," he said, voice low and deadly. "So I will." They tried to talk him down, suggested a strategic distancing. Instead, Jackson wrote an op-ed. In it, he told the truth. He told the world about Meredith, about their past, about the children he hadn't known he had, but who had become his greatest purpose. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try to be a hero. He was honest, and he ended it with this. This isn't a rebrand. This isn't a PR pivot. This is a father finally showing up. The response was instant. Some people mocked it, but others, they stood up for him. Other single parents, people who'd been adopted, fathers trying to reconnect, mothers who had made impossible choices. For every nasty headline, there were 10 letters thanking him. More importantly, there was Harper. She walked into his office one afternoon, dropped her backpack, and said, "That thing you wrote, it was cool." Jackson looked up. "You think so?" "Yeah, you didn't lie. You didn't spin it. You just told the truth." He smiled. "That's the goal." Then she added, "You're still embarrassing, but less now." The custody case wrapped quietly after that. No drama, no court battles, just signatures, agreements, and one very big change. The girls moved in full-time. Charlotte helped with the transition. Jackson hired a full-time educator to assist with after-school routines. He adjusted his schedule again, cut his workload by half, brought in a Cosio. People called him crazy. He didn't care, because one night, while tucking in Hannah, she reached up, grabbed his hand, and whispered, "You're doing good, Dad. Not you're trying. Not you're close. You're doing good." Jackson hadn't been back to Vermont in over 16 years. Not since the day he and Meredith had argued on the porch of her parents' cabin. Snow falling quietly around them while she stood shivering in that oversized flannel, arms crossed, eyes full of something like fear. Not since he'd driven away, without looking back. But now, sitting in the driver's seat of a rented SUV with 3 little girls in back seat and a GPS softly announcing arrival in 400 feet, he realized some ghosts don't stay buried, especially not when they're part of you. The cabin was still there, smaller than he remembered. The paint had faded, and the porch was sagging slightly. But the wind chimes were still on the eave. The old wooden swing still creaked in the breeze. Hannah was the first to speak. "This is where Mom used to come in the summer?" Jackson nodded. "Every year. Her parents built it before she was born." Haley craned her neck. "Did she bring you here?" "Once," he said quietly. Harper opened the car door. "Well, let's meet the ghosts." They stepped inside together. It smelled like cedar and something faintly floral, lavender, maybe. The girls wandered carefully, running their fingers along dusty countertops, flipping through books still stacked on the shelves. Jackson moved slowly, his footsteps heavy. Everything was the same. The same lopsided coffee mug on the mantel. The same woven blanket over the armchair. Even the same note, faded from sunlight, taped to the fridge. "Put your phone down. You're on lake time now." Meredith had written that. He'd laughed at it then. He wasn't laughing now. The girls discovered a trunk in the back room. Inside, photographs. Hundreds of them. Meredith as a kid. Meredith with Charlotte. Meredith in high school with braces and too much eyeliner. Meredith pregnant. Alone. Meredith holding 3 newborns, one in each arm, a nurse helping with a third. And then Meredith with Jackson. One photo. Only one. Tucked in the bottom corner. Faded, dog-eared, slightly torn at the edge. It was from their freshman year. Columbia's quad in spring. Jackson had his arm around her. She was laughing into the camera, eyes squinting against the sun. Haley picked it up. "You look happier," she said. Jackson nodded. "I was—" Hannah whispered. She kept it. He swallowed. "Yeah, she did." They spent the weekend cleaning up the cabin. Not because they had to, but because it felt like the right thing to do. They cleared out old clothes, aired out sheets, washed the dishes no one had touched in years. Harper handled the books. Haley sorted the tool shed. Hannah made flower arrangements from wildflowers outside and set one in every room. It was quiet work, healing work, grief done with your hands. On the last night, Jackson sat on the porch swing with Harper beside him. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Did you love her?" The question hung in the air, more than just about Meredith, more than just about the past. "I did," Jackson said finally, "more than I knew how to say back then. I think I ran because I was scared of how much." "Scared of what?" Harper asked. "Of messing it up, of not being enough, of hurting her." Harper looked out toward the lake. "You still did." "I know." Silence. Then Harper said, softer now, "She loved you, even when she didn't say it out loud." Jackson nodded. "I know that now." He waited, then added, "I just wish I could tell her I see it, that I finally get it." Harper looked over at him. "I think you just did." That night, Jackson found a journal in the bedroom drawer. Meredith's handwriting. He didn't read all of it. That didn't feel right. But he flipped to a random page, dated just before her diagnosis. "The girls are getting big. Harper's too smart for her own good. Haley corrects my grammar now. Hannah keeps trying to teach herself ballet off YouTube. Sometimes I sit on the porch and imagine what Jackson would have thought. He missed everything. But I hope one day he gets a chance to know them. Not for me, for them." He closed the book, heart thudding hard in his chest. Back in New York, things felt different, not in a dramatic way. Just softer, calmer. The girls were settling into life. Charlotte visited often. Jackson had fully adjusted his schedule. Mornings were breakfast and backpacks. Afternoons were pickup and project help. And at night, he read to them, tucked them in, sat on the edge of their beds, and listened to stories about recess drama or cafeteria debates. They started calling the penthouse home. And Jackson? He started to believe it. One evening, Jackson walked into Harper's room. She was at her desk, scribbling in a notebook. "Can I interrupt?" he asked. "Sure." He sat on the floor, beside her chair. "I have something for you." He held out a folded envelope. She took it, unfolded it. Inside, the original photo of him in Meredith, the one from the cabin. "I think it's yours now," he said. Harper stared at it. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "She was kind of hot," she said. Jackson laughed. That she was. Down the hall, Hannah was putting on a ballet show. Jackson, Haley, and Harper were seated in a makeshift audience of beanbags and stuffed animals. Hannah twirled in a pink tutu, nearly collided with the lamp, but stuck the landing with her arms in the air. "Tada!" she shouted. The room erupted in applause. And Jackson? He stood up, across the room, and lifted her into a hug. "You're amazing," he whispered. She giggled. "I know." Later that night, as he stood by the window, watching the lights of the city blink like stars, Jackson thought about how far he'd come. From boardrooms to ballet shows. From headlines to bedtime stories. From absence to presence. He wasn't trying to fix the past anymore. He was building the future. One bedtime. One carpool. One apology. One hug at a time. And for the first time in his life, Jackson Montgomery felt whole. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the knock came. Jackson had just finished making a mess of grilled cheese sandwiches with Hannah and was wiping mustard off the counter when Harper peeked down the hallway and called, "There's a guy at the door." "What kind of guy?" Jackson asked, already walking toward the entrance. She shrugged. "Older. Weird coat. Doesn't look like delivery." Jackson opened the door. Standing there, drenched, was a man in his mid-60s. Lean. Graying hair. Sharp eyes that seemed to have memorized sadness. "You're Jackson Montgomery?" the man asked, voice low and hoarse. "I am. Can I help you?" The man nodded once. "Name's Walter Blake. I knew Meredith." Jackson's heart skipped. He stepped aside. "Come in." Walter sat at the kitchen island, clutching a mug of black coffee. He didn't speak right away. The girls, sensing tension, stayed in their rooms. Jackson waited, watching him closely. "She never told me about you," Jackson said eventually. Walter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We weren't close in the traditional sense," he said. "I was her landlord. Owned the building where she lived the last few years. She was behind on rent half the time, but she always paid. Eventually," Jackson raised an eyebrow. "And now you're here because—" Walter reached into his coat, pulled out a folded letter. "She left something for you. Told me to deliver it personally. Said it might take time." Jackson took the envelope. His name was written on the front, in Meredith's handwriting. He stared at it for a moment, then carefully opened it. "Jackson, if you're reading this, I guess Walter finally tracked you down. That man would chase someone across oceans if he thought it'd help. There are things I never told you, not out of spite, not because I didn't trust you, but because I was trying to protect a version of you in my mind. When I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to call you. I did. I even dialed once. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. You were about to move to London. You were taking on the world. And I was scared. I didn't want to be the woman who changed your trajectory. I wanted to be the girl you remembered as magic, not the one who anchored you to a responsibility you never asked for. But now, if you're reading this, then I know the girls have found you, or you found them, and I hope you're still standing. There's one more thing I need to tell you, and I never figured out how to say it in person. There's a box under the floorboards of the bedroom in the Vermont cabin. It's not money. It's not secrets. But it's us. And maybe it'll help you understand why I did what I did. Love, always, Meredith. Jackson lowered the letter. Walter was watching him closely. She talked about you, Walter said. Not often, but when she did, it was never bitter. Jackson looked up. Did she say what was in the box? Nope, Walter said, standing. She said if I ever told you, she'd haunt me. Despite everything, Jackson chuckled. She probably would. Walter paused at the door. One more thing, he said, hand on the knob. She was proud of you. She didn't say it out loud, but it was in the way she talked about your name. And then he was gone. Jackson didn't sleep much that night. He sat on the balcony, Meredith's letter in his hands, the city glowing around him. By morning, he'd made a decision. They were going back to Vermont. Harper rolled her eyes when he announced the trip. Didn't we already do the whole Cabin of Secrets tour? She asked. There's more, Jackson said. A box on the floorboards. That got Haley's attention. Like a time capsule? Exactly. Hannah was already packing glitter markers. Back at the cabin, the air felt different, like the place knew they were coming. Jackson moved quietly through the bedroom, the girls trailing behind him. He rolled back the rug, pried up a loose board, and found it exactly where Meredith had said. A wooden box. No lock, just a smooth lid and the faint smell of cedar. He opened it. Inside, dozens of letters, all addressed to Jay. A dried rose, flattened in an old journal. A mixtape, dated 2009. A tiny knit baby hat. A photograph of Meredith holding a newborn, her expression exhausted and joyful at once. A handwritten note. I almost called you that night. I didn't, but I talked to you anyway. I said everything out loud in that hospital room, pretending you were there. And you know what? I think maybe you heard me. Jackson sat on the floor for a long time, surrounded by memories he didn't know he had. The girls sat with him. They didn't ask questions. They didn't push. They just held his hands. Harper leaned her head on his shoulder. And for the first time, Jackson let himself cry. Not for what was lost, but for what had been hidden and now finally found. Later that night, back in the living room, they built a fire and read Meredith's letters aloud. Each one was a moment in time. Her first week of motherhood, the night Harper walked for the first time, Haley's obsession with bugs, Hannah's night terrors and the lullabies she created to soothe her. Jackson's name came up over and over, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in longing, in hope, in love. It changed something, not in a dramatic, fireworks kind of way, but in the way the girls looked at Jackson, like the space between past and present had softened, like they understood he wasn't absent by choice, and that every time he said, I love you, he meant it tenfold. For the years he missed and the ones to come, back in New York, things felt different again, brighter, clearer. Harper stopped calling him Jackson in public. Haley started asking him for help on her robotics project. Hannah began leaving little notes on his pillow that read, Thanks for not being a robot, Dad. They didn't say it, but he knew. They were choosing him, not just biologically, but emotionally. And that was everything. It was a Tuesday when the call came in. Jackson had just finished packing Hannah's lunch. Crustless PB&J, apple slices, one of those organic juice pouches she claimed made her feel extra grown, when his phone buzzed a name he hadn't seen in over a decade. Daniel Kravitz. Silicon Valley royalty. Jackson hesitated. Picked it up. Daniel, he said, voice cautious. It's been a long time. Not long enough, the man chuckled, still breaking stock charts. Only on Tuesdays, Jackson replied. Daniel got to the point. I want you to run something. Jackson leaned against the counter, raising an eyebrow. Define something. A new fund, massive scale, full autonomy, your name on the door. I've got backers ready to drop $1 billion. Jackson blinked. $8 billion. Seed round. Silence. Daniel continued. This is the game, Jack. Real legacy stuff. You're not going to get another offer like this. You say the word, I fly to New York tonight. That night, Jackson couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city hum around him. $1 billion fund. His own legacy. Everything he'd worked toward before everything changed. Before Meredith. Before the girls. Before he found out what love actually meant. He wasn't sure he still wanted it, but part of him did, and that part scared him. At breakfast the next morning, Harper caught the look on his face. You okay? She asked, digging into her cereal. Jackson paused. Just tired. She narrowed her eyes. You got that face. What face? The face you make when you're about to do something dumb and pretend it's fine. He laughed. I thought you said I was less embarrassing lately. I said slightly less. Don't get cocky. Later that day, Jackson met Daniel at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park. Daniel hadn't changed. Same tailored suit. Same Rolex. Same smug confidence that once drove Jackson crazy, in both good and bad ways. They shook hands. Sat down. Daniel pulled out a glossy pitch deck. Jack, this is it. You'd have full control. Choose the partners. Hire your team. Build the legacy. Jackson flipped through it slowly. It was good. Very good. But something tugged at him. Why me? He asked finally. Daniel didn't hesitate. Because you're still the smartest guy in every room. You've got the name, the story, the credibility. You're the comeback kid. You're the father/billionaire everyone suddenly cares about. Jackson stiffened. So it's a PR play. It's a win-win, Daniel corrected. You get your life back. You build something permanent. And you show those daughters of yours what real power looks like. Jackson didn't answer. That night, back home, Jackson stood at the window while the girls argued over what movie to watch. Harper wanted something with espionage. Haley voted for a documentary on black holes. Hannah was leaning hard into the Barbie cinematic universe. Normal, beautiful, loud. And he remembered what Daniel said, you get your life back. But he didn't feel like he'd lost anything. If anything, all of this felt like gaining something bigger. The next morning, Jackson dropped the girls off at school. As they piled out of the car, Hannah leaned back in. Are you going to be home for dinner? He smiled. Always. She gave a thumbs up and ran off. And just like that, he knew. He called Daniel later that afternoon. I'm out, he said. Daniel exhaled hard. You serious? I am. This is $1 billion play, Jack. Jackson looked around his home. At the family photo taped to fridge. At the ballet shoes on the stairs. At the glitter still stuck in the grout from Hannah's last art project. I already made the biggest investment of my life, he said, and it's paying off every day. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then finally, you sure? Yeah, Jackson said. I'm sure. Harper found the pitch deck on the counter later. She flipped through it, paused, then looked up. So you said no to this? I did. Why? Jackson smiled. Because I don't want to build a legacy that pulls me away from you. She didn't say anything for a moment, then nodded. Good, she said, because I kind of like having you around. A few days later, Haley got her science fair results. First place, regional invitation. Jackson cleared his calendar for it immediately. The event was held in a packed auditorium. Kids presenting experiments. Posters everywhere. Nervous parents whispering in the back. Haley stood in front of her gravity model, explaining space-time curvature to a panel of stunned judges. Jackson stood nearby, beaming. After she finished, she ran over to him, flushed with pride. Did you see me? I saw everything. She smiled. I want to do this forever. You can, he said. But what if I have to choose one day, she asked. Like you did. He crouched to her level. You don't have to choose between doing great things and loving people deeply, he said. You just have to choose who you want to be great for. The next week, Jackson got a different kind of offer. A nonprofit focused on single parent support programs asked him to speak, not as a CEO, not as an investor, but as a father. He said yes without thinking. On stage, under soft lights, Jackson shared his story. He didn't make himself a hero. He talked about missing the beginning. He talked about Meredith. He talked about mistakes, about dinners burned, appointments missed, and how parenting felt like learning to walk blindfolded. But mostly, he talked about the girls, how they changed everything, how they made him better, how every day he chose them again and again. When he finished, the room stood, not in applause, but in understanding, real connection, not just admiration. Backstage, a woman approached him. Single mom, 3 kids, working nights. I thought I was failing, she said, but your story made me feel less alone. Jackson reached for her hand. You're not alone, he said. None of us are. That night, as he tucked the girls in, Harper looked up from her book. Dad. Yeah. Do you think Meredith will be proud of you? Jackson paused, then nodded slowly. I think she already was. The first time it happened, Jackson thought it was just stress. He was walking home after picking up Thai takeout, scrolling through Haley's new science quiz score on his phone, when his chest tightened like someone had cinched a strap across his ribs. It wasn't a sharp pain, more like a heavy one, enough to make him stop, lean against a lamppost, and wait for the world to stop spinning. It passed after a few seconds. He didn't tell anyone. The second time, it didn't pass. He was in the kitchen making pancakes for Hannah, blueberries her favorite, when the pressure in his chest returned. His vision blurred. Sweat broke out along his hairline. The spatula clattered to the floor. Hannah's little voice was the last thing he heard clearly. Daddy? At the hospital, they ran every test twice. The nurse kept asking if he had a history of heart disease. He didn't. He was fit, ate clean, managed stress better than most hedge fund execs. Still, the cardiologist looked at the chart, then at Jackson and said, You're lucky you came in when you did. Jackson blinked. Wait, what are you saying? You had a mild heart attack, the doctor said, likely brought on by stress and long-term strain. Nothing catastrophic. But if we don't change some things, next time might not be so kind. Jackson stared at the white wall behind the man's head, not because he didn't hear, but because he didn't want to hear. They kept him overnight. Monitors, beeping, IVs. Jackson hated hospitals. They reminded him too much of Meredith, of endings, of goodbyes. When Charlotte arrived, she didn't bring flowers. She brought a folder. You need to put your affairs in order, she said gently. He sighed. It wasn't that bad. You were unconscious, Jack. Hannah called 911. His heart twisted, not from the condition, but from the image of his little girl watching him crumble. He reached for the folder. Inside were templates, guardianship papers, letters he might want to write. What if this is all overreacting? He whispered. Charlotte looked at him, steady, unflinching. What if it's not? When the girls visited, Jackson tried to smile. He didn't want them to worry. But they weren't stupid. Harper crossed her arms. Are you going to die? No, he said. At least not any time soon. You promise? Hannah asked, climbing onto the hospital bed beside him. I promise I'll do everything I can not to, he whispered, brushing her hair back. Haley didn't say anything, just held his hand. Back home, things felt fragile. Jackson moved slower, ate better, slept earlier. But something deeper had shifted. The illusion that there would always be more time, more breakfast, more bedtime stories, more chances to explain, had shattered. So he started writing. Letters. One for each girl, to be read if he couldn't be there. To Harper, he wrote, You're my mirror and my fire. You see through everything, especially me. Never dull that, but also never forget. It's okay to not be okay. You don't always have to carry the weight alone. To Haley, you're the architect of stars, the one who sees a how in the world. Keep building. Keep asking questions. But don't forget to feel while you calculate. Your heart is just as brilliant as your brain. To Hannah, you're magic, pure and unfiltered. The way you love, it rewired me. Whatever happens, know this. You made me softer, stronger, braver. You made me dad. He sealed each one, locked them in a drawer in his study, told Charlotte where they were, just in case. But letters weren't enough. He needed to prepare them in life, not just in case of death. So he started teaching them more, how to file taxes, how to negotiate, how to stand up for themselves in a room full of louder voices. He brought Harper to a nonprofit board meeting, let her sit in on strategy calls, asked her opinion afterward, and took it seriously. He let Haley shadow a tech incubator he once invested in. She peppered the engineers with questions for hours. He took Hannah to volunteer at a community center, where she spent 2 hours teaching a 3-year-old how to color inside the lines. Every moment became intentional, every action legacy. One evening, while watching a sunset from the roof, Harper said something that stopped him cold. "You know, we're not scared anymore." He looked over. "What do you mean?" "When you were in the hospital," she said, "we thought everything would fall apart. But it didn't." She shook her head. "Because you built something here. A life, a rhythm. It wouldn't be the same without you. But we'd survive. You taught us how." Jackson felt tears sting his eyes, not from sadness, but from something that felt suspiciously like peace. The next day, he had a follow-up appointment. Good news. His heart was stronger. Better news. He caught everything early. The doctor smiled. "You've got time, Jackson. Just make it count." He already was. That night, while tucking Hannah in, she whispered, "You scared me." "I know," he said softly. "I scare me too." "Promise you'll be careful?" "I promise I'll try." She was quiet, then added, "Even if you're not here forever, I'll still remember everything you taught me." He kissed her forehead. "That's the best thing I've ever heard." Time moved differently after the scare, slower in the quiet moments, fast in the ones Jackson wished he could stretch forever. It was as if his heart had reminded him, life is not infinite, but it's enough if you're really there for it. The girls kept growing, not just taller, but bigger somehow, in presence, in opinion, in direction. And just like that, the next phase began. Harper came to him one evening, a printed email in hand, her face unreadable. He thought maybe it was bad news. But it wasn't. "I got in," she said simply, handing him the letter. It was an acceptance. Stanford, early admission, political science and philosophy. A full ride. Jackson blinked. "I didn't even know you applied." Harper shrugged. Didn't want to say anything unless it was real. He didn't know what to say, so he said what he meant. "I'm proud of you." Her face softened. "I know," she whispered. "That's why it mattered." Haley was next, not with an application, but with an idea. "I wanted to for college," she said. Jackson turned from the stove, spatula still in hand. "Come again?" "I want to build something. An actual prototype, not just theory. I found a startup in Berlin working on zero-waste batteries. They offered me an internship. Paid. Berlin. The word hit like a punch. That's far." She nodded. "But I think it's where I'm supposed to be." Jackson looked at her, this fiercely brilliant girl who used to cry when her Lego sets didn't fit perfectly. Now she was designing futures. "You sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure." And even though it terrified him, he believed her. Hannah stayed close. But even she was starting to spread her wings. Art competitions, recitals, community programs. She was 13 going on 30. One night, Jackson found her painting in the living room, surrounded by canvases and open jars of acrylic. What are you working on? She didn't look up. A portrait, she said, of Mom. Jackson's breath caught. He walked around slowly and saw it, still unfinished. Meredith's eyes were only half painted, but already somehow alive. She's beautiful, he said. I want people to remember her. They will, he whispered, because of you. With each passing week, the house got quieter, not in noise, but in energy, the kind of silence that comes before change. Jackson knew this feeling. It was a calm before goodbye. They threw a party before Harper and Haley left. Nothing extravagant, just close friends, family, Charlotte, neighbors who had watched the girls grow up and fast forward. There were speeches, laughter, a slideshow that made everyone cry, especially Jackson. After the guests left, the four of them sat on the rooftop under string lights. No one said much, until Harper broke the silence. You gonna be okay, old man? Jackson grinned. Only if you call me that once a week. I'll text every Sunday, she promised, with political takes and terrible dating updates. Haley chimed in. And I'll send you German snacks you probably won't like. Hannah added, and I'll be here to remind you to breathe. Jackson looked at all three of them, his chest aching in that full kind of way. I don't need reminders to breathe, he said. Being your dad already taught me how. Airport day came faster than expected. Harper went first. Gate 22. Boarding to SFO. She hugged Hannah so tight it left the younger girl red-faced. Kissed Haley on the cheek, then turned to Jackson. This is the part where you cry, she said. He smirked. Not yet. She pulled him into a hug and whispered, thanks for being brave. He whispered back, thanks for giving me something to be brave for. 2 days later, it was Haley's turn. International Terminal. Gate 14. Berlin. She was quiet in the car. Jackson didn't push. At the gate, she turned to him suddenly. I packed your cufflinks. He frowned. Why? So, when I present the prototype, I remember where I came from. He didn't cry then either. But the moment she walked away, backpack bouncing, braids swinging, he felt something deep inside loosen. Not break, just release. It was just him and Hannah now. She filled the house with music and questions and wild stories from school. But some nights, she'd crawl into bed beside him and say nothing. Just lie there. And he understood. Loss doesn't always come from death. Sometimes it's just the space between what was and what is. One night, Hannah asked, Do you miss them? Every minute, he said. But do you want them back? Jackson thought about it. No, he said, because this is where they're meant to be. She nodded. I think that's love. Wanting someone to fly even if it means you're alone. He kissed her forehead. Who taught you that? You did. Later, when the house was dark and quiet, Jackson stood in the hallway. Framed art from Hannah. A robotics trophy from Haley. A Stanford sweatshirt draped over the banister. Everywhere he looked, traces of his girls. He didn't feel empty. He felt full, because he had raised 3 people brave enough to leave, and kind enough to come back. It started with a letter, not one Jackson had written, but one sent to him. 10 years had passed. 10 good years. The girls had grown into women. Women who knew what they wanted, who knew how to love without fear, who disagreed with him often, and still called him every Sunday. Harper was running for local office in Oakland. Haley had just been listed on a Forbes Innovators Under 35. Hannah had sold her first gallery show in Brooklyn. And Jackson? He was still here. A little slower, a little grayer, a little more prone to tearing up at commercials. But alive and full. So when the letter came, handwritten in a tidy serif script, he didn't expect it to knock the wind out of him. It was from Hannah. But not the Hannah sleeping down the hall in high school. This was a grown woman's voice. A reflection. A tribute. Dad, I've been trying to find the right time to write this. But then I remembered, you always said there's no perfect moment, just the one you're in. I was asked in an interview what made me brave. And without hesitation, I said your name. You showed me that bravery isn't loud. It's steady. It's staying. It's learning how to cook pancakes when you've never cracked an egg. It's showing up at parent-teacher night when your voice is still hoarse from working all day. It's saying, I love you, even when you don't know what tomorrow holds. You build us a life, Dad, not out of money or power, but out of love layered over time. I carry you in every brushstroke. Harper carries you in every speech. Haley carries you in every blueprint. We're your echo. Just wanted you to know you did it right. Love, always. Hannah. Jackson sat with that letter for a long time, not reading it over and over, but holding it like it might dissolve if you let go. That weekend, all three girls came home. Harper brought her fiancé, kind eyes, quick wit. Haley brought blueprints for a nonprofit tech hub she wanted to build in Cambodia. Hannah brought a canvas, wrapped in cloth. She made them all wait until dinner. Then, with quiet ceremony, she unveiled it. It was a portrait of Jackson, not the one from photos or press clippings, but him, sitting on the cabin porch, a book in his lap, Meredith's old blanket across his shoulders, the girls in motion all around him, blurry, laughing free. It wasn't nostalgia. It was legacy, rendered in oil and memory. Jackson didn't speak for a full minute. Then he whispered, I remember that day. You weren't in the photo, Hannah said, but you were the reason it mattered. They stayed for 3 days, laughed, argued, cooked, watched home videos. On the last night, Jackson and Harper sat on the porch, watching the moon rise. She sipped her wine, looked over. You afraid of getting older? Jackson chuckled. I am older, but like old. Do you think about that? He nodded. Sometimes. And he leaned back in his chair. I think I used to be afraid of disappearing, of being forgotten, of not matching. And now, he looked at her. Now I know I live in people, not timelines. Harper smiled. Your campaign slogan's gonna suck if you keep being that poetic. In the morning, they packed up. Haley hugged him like she always did. Tight, fast, meaningful. Hannah slipped a new sketchbook into his bag for when you finally start writing again. Harper kissed his cheek. See you next Sunday. And then they were gone. Jackson stood at the window, watched the car disappear, listened to the stillness. Then he walked to his desk, opened a drawer, took out the letters he had written all those years ago, just in case. He added a new one, not sealed, not hidden, just left on top, where anyone could read it. To whoever finds this, I hope you know I didn't get everything right. I yelled too loud some days. I missed a few recitals. I burned more dinners than I want to admit, but I love them more than I love the sound of my own name. And if I'm gone when you read this, just know I was never trying to be perfect, just present, just theirs. And in the end, that was enough. Years later, when the house finally changed hands, the new owners found the letter. They framed it, hung it in the hallway. People always stopped to read it. And in some way, even after Jackson was gone, he stayed.